Good morning, afternoon, and evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Zachary Nolan, and welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning in. If this is your first time, please subscribe and leave a like on the video. Really do appreciate it. Obviously, with the Jets offseason still well underway, we have a couple videos that we're going to be putting out as the news breaks. Pretty much, we have a Nikolai Ehlers possible trade video on the horizon and coaching options for the Winnipeg Jets video on the horizon. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. No. Today, we're here to talk about Jacob Julien, who has been, honestly, I'll admit it, a better draft pick than I thought he would be. Jacob Julien was selected last year in round 5, 146th overall by the Winnipeg Jets. He was selected about 5 spots ahead of Thomas Milic, as the Jets had 2 picks in the 5th round. And last year's draft class was an interesting bunch, obviously. Colby Barlow was the headliner of that draft class, a guy with an elite shot, and still had to work a little bit on his skating ability, but seemed like a great finishing talent for the Winnipeg Jets in the future. They then went to Zach Naring, who has had mixed results in the college scene. Then they had to skip a couple rounds, and they move on to Thomas Milic and Jacob Julien in the 5th round, and then Connor Levis in the 7th round. Jacob Julien was one of those picks that people went, it's okay. I feel like they could have went another direction with that. And it was a meh. It was a meh reaction. I'll be honest, I wasn't totally sure what they saw in this. And I'm actually going to read one of the draft guides that they have on Jacob Julien just to kind of see what the perspective was on him going into the draft. Persistence defines Julien's game. He never gives up on a play. He always takes the extra stride to get next to the opponent and skates through their hands to win body positioning. Well-timed pokes and stick lifts eliminate threats in his own zone. While Julien's defense drives his game, there's offensive upside here. By entering every touch with a couple of scans, he quickly advances pucks to the next teammate. Now, that kind of does make sense in defining Jacob Julien's game. In the last year, he had only played 1 year in the OHL, and he only had 16 points with the London Knights, and he was already about to become an overager. In the playoffs, he did a little better with 7 in 20 games, and he had also played in the Junior Ontario League with 43 points in 36 games and 41 points in 22 games. That being said, there's nothing really stellar about those numbers, and I think people would say by their own admission that Jacob Julien had yet to blossom. I think it is safe to say, as a prospect, he has blossomed quite nicely this year. I kind of mentioned it a couple times in the background of a few Jets game reactions in our regular segment Moose Watch, but Jacob Julien has been lighting up the OHL. He finished with 78 points in 67 games for a total of 29 goals and 49 assists. Granted, he did play on a loaded London Knights team that, by the way, has looked extremely impressive. However, he has defined his own success on that team as well. He's always been staying in the top 6, most commonly on the top line. And obviously, there are other names to talk about on the London Knights. Holtman, who has been on loan from the San Jose Sharks, was exceptional in their role. And obviously, as well, if there's ever going to be a Toronto Maple Leafs prospect that's doing well, you're going to hear about it. And this year, it was Easton Cowan, who has got the playoff MVP, regular season MVP, and just overall league MVP, although people will debate who should have deserved that. However, Easton Cowan was pretty much setting records in continuous point streaks, which is also helped because sometimes his line mate was Jacob Julien. Julien had a great playoffs. Last year, obviously, he had 7 points in 20 games. This year, he rebounded with 18 points in 18 total playoff games for 9 goals and 9 assists. And notably, in the 2nd round, had back-to-back hat-trick games in what would end up being a sweep. And honestly, the London Knights were just an absolute juggernaut. They didn't lose any. I don't know if they lost a single game on the way to the OHL, to the Memorial Cup. They just won the OHL finals last night in a sweep where they scored 33 goals in a matter of 4 games. They had outscored their opponents 17-2. They overcame a 6-2 deficit in Game 3, completed the sweep in Game 4 with a dominating performance. Honestly, this team could be a real contender for the Memorial Cup. That being said, all the teams that have earned their way into the Memorial Cup, I have to say, they've been very dominant. So we'll see how it goes. Jacob Julien is a guy that will definitely get an entry-level contract with the Winnipeg Jets. I've already made the thumbnail for it. Like I already got Carter to make a thumbnail for it because it's that much of a guarantee. In looking at his game, it's people always like to say he has an Adam Lowry-esque ability to him. And you know what? I don't hate that comparison. I think it's really hard to make those comparisons, obviously, because some guys show a little bit more raw skill. But it is worth noting that he uses his size extremely effectively well, and his defense is not bad at all. I haven't looked at him and just been like, oh, he's an empty calorie scorer. I've seen the effort both ways of the ice, which is a great thing to see, especially from prospects. Being able to show that hunger, even though you might be like, for example, Julian's 19, so he's definitely been around, but honestly, I've been fully impressed with him at every stage of this season. He has risen to the occasion. He's also been a great, what's the word I'm looking for? A great presence on the power play. Being on the power play, he has been able to be extremely successful, and he's been a great net front presence, which is always good. Net front presence are people in the power play that I think have to work a lot harder sometimes because they're not working with the same passes. They are pretty much having to shield the goalie from being able to stop the initial shots. And those people have to work almost twice as hard, and sometimes get the puck fired at you, which is, you know, it's not ideal. We'll see how the London Knights fare in the Memorial Cup. Obviously, this is just another great thing to see, though, for Jets prospects. He was the only Jets prospect that really went deep in the playoffs, and he won the OHL playoffs, so that's great to see. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts of Jacob Julien. I feel like it's a prospect we don't really talk about that much, which I understand. There's other higher, flashier name values up there, but for sure, he's definitely entering that conversation of noteworthy Winnipeg Jets draft prospects. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day, and we will see you next time, which will be later because we're streaming the Oilers and Canucks game